again. Hello again. I was just commenting a few minutes ago how it feels so odd that, on the one hand, this is the last Meet the Artist session, and there's still a whole weekend of the festival to go. On the other hand, it's the sixth Meet the Artist session that I've conducted in the last week. And there have been some fascinating conversations, and I want to thank everybody who's come out and participated, even if just by listening to them. I'm going to mention one more session that I have, which is Saturday afternoon at 5:30 in the Tarrant Gallery up on street level. We do a listen here session every year. I describe it as an audio book club, not an audio book club, but an audio book club, where we listen to a classic recording and talk about it. And the recording this year is Benny Golson's New York Scene, to dovetail a bit back to last Sunday when we spoke with Benny and when we heard him perform in the Flynn Theater. Today, however, and tonight, we're here to talk to and then later to listen to the music of one of the new important musicians in the music who has, I know, been here previously because I believe it was either last year or 2 years ago. I heard him with Christian McBride's Inside Straight in the Flynn Theater. I have not had the pleasure before of hearing him lead his own group, so I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited about talking to him and getting his story. So without further ado, please welcome Warren Wolf. You'll be well hydrated, Warren.
Yes, indeed.
I was reading your bio, and one thing that jumped out at me, we do a lot of these conversations, and this is the third day in a row where I'll be speaking to someone who started playing music with their parent at a very early age. We had Julian Lage on Tuesday and Jeff Keyser yesterday, and now Warren. And tell me a little bit about that. Was your father a professional musician?
No, he wasn't. My father was he's still here with us. I said was, I'm sorry. But he's a retired Baltimore City Public Schools history teacher. He taught history, U.S. history and world history in schools. But on the weekends, he had a band around Baltimore, and they would play little tiny clubs and stuff like that. And we're talking in the 80s, so he was playing music of Anita Baker, Yellow Jackets, Spiral Gyra, music from the Motown in the 70s and things like that.
And what did he play? What was his?
His main thing was always vibes and percussion for the most part. But he was self-taught, again, on the vibes, the percussion, drum set, and piano. So as a young child, from what he told me, I don't remember any of this. When I was 2 years old, he said I used to come down into the basement and I would just lift my head and always enjoy these wonderful sounds. So he started me playing at the age of 3 years old, when I was just a little kid. And I don't recall if I liked any of it. I really doubt it. But I was just telling somebody, I just had an interview outside, and I remember playing the drums. That was one of the first instruments he started me on. He's a left-handed person, so I play left-handed drums, which is totally opposite of what we see behind us.
Right.
The only reason I play that way, again, is because he's a left-handed person, so I saw the drum set up that way, so I was like, oh, this must be right, but it's not right. But so I had to stand up to play the drums, and I was also too short to reach the vibes or the marimba. So my dad built a box that was about maybe 2 feet off of the ground in order for me to reach it. And he started giving me formal piano lessons at the age of 5, somewhere around there. So that's the beginnings.
And you really followed in his footsteps as a multi-instrumentalist, right?
Yes,
Because,
everything he did, I wanted to do it.
okay.
The only thing that I couldn't do as well as he could do was play the congas, the conga drums, because there was a way he would slap the drums. If you all know about the conga drums, there's a certain sound that you can get out of that drum. It sounds like a something like that, and I could never do it. Mine would just more be like, something like that. And I was like, how do you do that? So he can still do that better than me, and I can't do it. But you know,
Well, were you? Did you begin to concentrate on one instrument, or was it just a little bit of everything?
no, we did a little bit of everything. My practice schedule pretty much started like seriously practicing at the age of 5. Even though he started me at 3, I had my first professional gig at 5. Um,
Oh, you
Yeah,
beat Julian
seriously.
Lodge by 2 years.
Now, my first professional gig was at the age of 5, but the practicing schedule, well, let's go before that for a second. I was an ordinary kid, woke up, went to school, came home, ate cereal, watched cartoons. But when 5:30 came around, that's when it's time to go down to the basement. I like to call it the dungeon. So we did 30 minutes on, and it's not in any order. It just depended. 30 minutes on the piano, 30 minutes on the vibraphone or marimba, and another 30 minutes on the drums. That could always vary. Um, we did that 5 days a week. Saturday mornings, I actually went to the Peabody Preparatory in Baltimore, Maryland, and I took lessons with. He's not here with us anymore. His name is Leo LePage. He was a former member of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. I took lessons with him at Peabody for about 7 years, and Sunday was like the free day. I would just go and play with my sisters.
Now, was LePage teaching you mallets, piano? What was?
No, he taught everything as well because in the symphony orchestra you have to learn everything. You never know. Even though it's primarily classical music, there are certain times in the orchestras where you have to play drum set. But the interesting thing about Mr. LePage, he was actually a jazz drummer in Boston before he moved to Baltimore and joined the Baltimore Symphony. So in my lessons at Peabody, we did sometimes a little bit of a jazz drum set, but the majority of my lessons with him were always just snare drum studies to work on sticking and all the rudiments and things like that. And then we would jump over and play a lot of classical things on the marimba. Now there are not a lot of pieces that were made for marimba at the time. So what we would do, we would play pieces that were made for flute, violin, and piccolo and things like that.
Anything in the key of C? Is that
Yeah,
it?
something
Okay.
like that. So that was my time with him. Also, back to the practicing thing, real quick. Like I said, we practiced 5 days a week with my dad. During the summers, that practice schedule would double because the neighborhood that I grew up in Baltimore City was pretty rough. So he wanted to keep me out of the streets. So the practicing schedule, we basically went downstairs at 1 o'clock, and it went until 2:30. Had a break. I'll still go outside, hang out with friends and things like that. Come back 5:30 to 7 o'clock.
Now you mentioned Baltimore being rough. This is off the subject, but
Mm-hmm.
for those of us who watched The Wire and took it all in,
I knew it was coming.
how accurate a picture of Baltimore did that present?
Well, do y'all know what The Wire is? Okay, for those who don't know, it's a pretty. Well, I actually don't know what it's about so much because I've never watched that show because I live in the city.
Oh, okay. All right.
But it's
It's a detective show,
Yes.
but based around it was an HBO show. It lasted 5 seasons, and each season focused on a particular social issue. So one was about drug trade, and one was about labor unions, and one about the public schools.
Yeah.
And
No, I mean that city is. I mean, I'm sorry, that series is very accurate to the city itself. I grew up in the inner city of Baltimore, but like I said, he wanted to keep me out of that. Right now, I do not. I still live in Baltimore, but not necessarily Baltimore. I live in a suburb called Owens Mills, which is the same area where my hometown team, the Baltimore Ravens, is where that's where they train at up there. So, but it's pretty accurate.
the for those who don't know and might know the series Treme, it was sort of the creation of the same writer who used to be a reporter for a newspaper, I think.
Was it David Simon?
David Simon.
Yeah.
And the connection there is Donald Harrison, who's playing tomorrow night, appears several times in the series Treme, which is about New Orleans and social issues in that city. So he kind of has a pattern when he develops these shows. Now, when as you grew older, were there situations where you were forced to declare yourself on one particular instrument? Let's say when you went to high school and were playing in the orchestra or the band, and say, "Okay, Wolf, what's your axe?" Did you have an answer?
No, Actually, we can go. Let's go before that. We can go to middle school
Okay.
first. Uh, in middle school, we had our wind ensemble. You know, we had about 50 clarinet players as usual. That's like the instrument that most kids gravitate to, and we had the jazz band. So in wind ensemble, I was actually playing a lot of drum set and percussion, like the snare drum and bass drum parts. And in the jazz band, they put me strictly on piano. So pretty much, I tried to make it known wherever I went that I could do multiple things. And this has continued on through middle school to high school to college in Boston. So no, I was never limited to just that one. People didn't know about the vibraphone so much in middle school because we didn't own the vibraphone. But when I went to high school, which was the Baltimore School for the Arts, that school we had graduates like Mark Gross and Antonio Hart. And outside of music, the best two known actors who went to that school were the late rapper Tupac Shakur and Jada Pinkett. She's the wife of Will Smith. Those are the two people who went to that school. But when we got there, I mean, when I got to that school, it was more known that that's the vibe guy. But I am a percussion major at the school, so I was required to play vibes, marimba, timpani, chimes, and sometimes they would even put me on piano. It all depends. I like to look at myself as the like a ultimate utility guy.
Okay. And your dad had vibes at home, so you were playing vibes from a young age, or were you playing xylophone?
From what I remember in elementary school because I was still little. He had a little set of bells that could fit in like a briefcase, so I would take that to school. But he definitely had vibes. He bought some. He told me in 1979, which was the year I was born, and he had vibes, marimba. We had everything in our basement. We had vibes, marimba. He had about 5 keyboards. I thought he was Joe Zawino. You know, he had a bunch of keyboards, like one right here, you know, for the waist, and another one up here, then another one to the side.
He had them
And
set up so he could
yeah,
play them all at once.
and
Okay.
he had the drums in the corner, and then like I said, he's a percussion guy, so he had a pile of conga drums and a lot of bongos, and he had gongs. We have everything, and we still have it now. It's just not in that basement anymore. It's in our private studio where we have even more stuff. It's a lot.
Well, before we started, I was talking to some people in the audience about one thing, the vibes that fascinates me is that the motor allows, to alter the sound by the way you control the the speed, I guess. So that if you think of Lionel Hampton's sound compared to Milt Jackson's sound compared to Bobby Hutcherson compared to Gary Burton, they're very different. And could you explain what goes on there and how you, in trying to find a sound, work your way through all that to get what you want to hear?
Well, it's kind of hard. I mean, I'll vary with the sounds or the motor, the speeds of the motor on the vibes. I will never put it as fast as Lionel Hampton did. That's kind of like a drunken noir type of thing. It's like a dark, gloomy, and spacey type thing. But it sounds good. I mean, depending on the type of music you're doing. At that time, Lionel Hampton was doing a lot of just basic swing, and he continued that swing all the way up until the time of his death. That was just his calling in music. When Milt Jackson came along, he kind of slowed the motor down, and the sound of the vibes, they kind of sound like a bird singing. It just gave a nice little tremolo to it, I guess you can call it, kind of like the organ behind us. And then you have other players like Gary Burton. He really doesn't use
Right.
the motor at all. I like to go back and forth. It depends. Like if we're playing something fast and up tempo, I really won't use it because you won't be able to tell if it's on or not. But when we're playing the ballad, okay, that's one thing. I'll try to turn it on. So it all depends on what you want.
Okay. Now, I know a lot of people who are not as all-purpose as you. Once they're focused on an instrument, they got idols and they try to emulate them and work their way through that. With so much at your disposal, who are the musicians who were inspiring you before you got to Berkeley?
Well, the number one person who really inspired me, who just like gave me the person who just really attracted me. I'm talking like I know the guy because I don't, but it was Charlie Parker. The way that he played his horn, when I saw that Omni book, if you don't know what it is, it's a book that's transcribed full of Charlie Parker solos, and the way that he expressed his solos and throughout his music, it was just something that I wanted to do. me personally as a musician, I told myself that I never ever wanted to sound like another vibraphonist. You know, I always wanted to have my own voice, and I think that's important in music because suppose everybody in this room, if we all had the same voice and we all talked the same, you can never tell what the difference is. So as a musician, you want to separate yourself from everybody else. And so another reason why I did that, and I'll tell you this quick story. When I was at Berkeley, my first semester, I was doing my jury, and my teacher was Dave Samuels. He's a leader of the Caribbean Jazz Project, and he was also with Spiral Gyra. So Dave, I loved his playing. So I used to, before I got to Berkeley, I told myself I want to be like that guy. He sounds so great. So when I got to Berkeley, I finished the jury, and a couple of teachers, they were like, "Yeah, Warren, you know, you sound great. You passed. Everything is fine. We can tell you've been checking out a lot of Dave Samuels because you're playing a lot of his stuff." And I said, "Yeah, I have." They said, "Okay, you know, great. We'll see you next semester." When I walked out the room, I told myself, nobody will ever say that to me again. So what I tried to do as a musician, and this is good musicians, bad musicians, I don't care who it is. I feel I can learn something from anybody. I have a perfect pitch, so I have the ability to like take something that anybody plays, and I'll kind of just take it in from the brain, and it'll just come right out. And I try to take parts from any musician, like from horn players to vibraphone players to bass players and piano players. I'll try to take parts of all of those guys or whoever I choose to listen to, put it all together, and out will come my own personal sound. Um, Another reason why I never checked out vibraphone is because I always thought it was cool to play some type of melodic run on the vibraphone that maybe a horn player did. I truly don't see people doing that too much. Nowadays, when I see, say, like if you see a saxophonist, you look through their CD collection, you see a bunch of saxophone CDs. You see a trumpet player, you see, oh, check out this trumpet player, check out this, and check out this. If you look at my CD collection when it comes to jazz and vibraphone players, you'll probably see like maybe four. You'll see a bunch of horn players because I'm more interested in how they get around their instruments, and I just want to be very versatile.
Now, listening to your new album today, one thing struck me was that while your solos and your playing, I didn't say, oh, he's coming out of Milt Jackson or Bobby Hutcherson or whatever, that some of the compositions really raise those images. The duet Wolfgang, for
Yes.
instance, has very much a modern jazz quartet vibe to it, even though it's only piano and vibes. Was that an intentional thing on your part?
It kind of was. When I first wrote that song, if you guys heard the record, the name of the song again is called Wolfgang. I actually composed that song for choir. That was the original thing because I was thinking about something else. But as usual on at least my records, I always try to have that one track where it's like, where can I do something that's totally different outside of everything else? So Aaron Deal, he's a great pianist who I work with in this band. He's kind of like a really fascinated with John Lewis. John Lewis was the musical director of the Modern Jazz Quartet, and I knew he would be perfect for this. He has the correct classical touch. He's a classical pianist who happens to know a bunch of jazz music. And it just happened to come out that way. I said, Aaron, let's play this. I didn't have to say much to him. He knew exactly what I wanted. And he's kind of like one of my musical blood brothers, I'll say. So he is very a deep connection between me and him.
I want to go back to what you said about your determination not to sound like specific people. I think one of the raps on younger musicians who go through the education system is that that's what they're looking for. They get to a place like Berkeley and they play the trumpet. And how do I sound like Woody Shaw? What do I have to do to sound like him?
Yeah.
You know, or playing the saxophone. What do I have to do to sound like Joe Lovano? Is that a misperception of the musical generation? Because you seem particularly well focused on being creative beyond that kind of imitative
Well, I think
approach.
we as musicians, and I'm including myself in this because we've all been there. We just have to grow and just be smarter than that. I mean, I think all of us at one point, we all wanted to sound like that one person. Um, there are a number coming to Baltimore, like at Peabody, Gary Thomas, a great tenor player, he works at Peabody Preparatory. He runs the jazz program, and the majority of the students down there all sound like Gary Thomas, but they're 20 years old and 21. They don't really know much. They haven't played with anybody, and they're coming straight out of high school, and they heard this guy on record. Oh wow, that's Gary Thomas. I want to go to Peabody and sound like him. Oh, this is when he was alive, Jackie McLean. Let's go to Hart School, and I want to study with him. Let's sound like him. How many people, one of the biggest artists out here who people tend to copy is Kenny Garrett on alto saxophone. It's like, I mean, he's one hell of a musician, but we're all young, but we just all have to go and play with certain people, and it kind of bring us out of that. With me, it helped when I got with Christian McBride. I mean, it stopped before that, but it helped even more when I got with Christian B. I'm the youngest guy in the band, and playing with him, it just kind of opened my ears up for many new things. And then playing with multiple other people, it's just you have to be open to try and experiment with new things.
One thing I know that you were involved in your years at Berkeley was Wally's. And I don't know, do people know Wally's in Boston? Could you explain to those who don't what Wally's is and what your role was there?
Wally's is a tiny club. Don't ever go. No.
Yeah, it's about a third the size
No.
of this room.
Yeah. No, it really is a small club. I think it holds no more than about seating wise. I think it holds about 25 people, and then standing up, it holds about another. Well, depending if you're trying to not get caught by the fire guy, it probably holds about another 40 standing up. But it's a great place to really learn how to play. And they have music 7 nights a week. Doesn't matter, 365 days per year. And I don't know what they're doing now because it's been some years since I've been there. But when I was there, Sunday nights was a funk night, Mondays blues, Tuesday and Wednesday back to funk, Thursday was Latin, Friday and Saturday was straight ahead jazz, and then we had the Sunday afternoon jam session. You could always find me Friday and Saturday nights playing drums with a trumpeter named Jason Palmer, who's still there. And on Sunday afternoons, we would do the jam session. And, it's not a lot of money. It wasn't about the money. It's more about just learning how to play.
Well, I believe that the family has operated that club for 100 years at this
That's
point.
right.
And it used to be across the street, and at some point it moved. But one thing it's known for is a lot of people who came through either Berkeley or New England Conservatory who would go there to sit in and jam. As they become recognized professionals, if they happen to be in town and the gig's over, they might show up at Wally's and
Very much.
sit in. So what are some of those experiences you had there?
I remember one of the first people who came down to sit in. I was like, wow. I was just kind of blown away. I mean, he's a name for me. I don't think most people would know who he is, but I was at the club one night, and Wessel Anderson came down. He's an alto player who played with Wynton Marsalis,
Right.
his sextet for years. And I remember sitting outside during our break. I was sitting on the stoop, and all of a sudden, here comes this. He's a big guy, so he comes walking down the street with his horn. I said, "Wow, that's Wessel Anderson. He's going to play." And I said, "Come on, y'all, let's get back in here. We got to play." Because at that point in time, when I was 19 years old, I'm thinking, I was kind of like out to kill. So my motto was like, let's go in here and play our butts off, and let's try to get a gig. That's one story. I remember another time, just after I left the club, or I left Boston, I just happened to come back in town, and I went down to Wally's to hang out. And this was the first time I actually met my organ player, Jake Sherman. He was in there playing, and then I walk in there, and Lord behold, who was on guitar? It's Kevin Eubanks from the Jay Leno Tonight Show. I was like, wow, he's in here. There's been times I saw, a lot of actors. I saw Tommy Davidson to Bruce Willis, Rory Hargrove, Chick Corea, Wynton Marsalis. So many people have come through this club. You would never know, but it's just such a great environment to play. You don't have a lot of people. There's been a lot of clubs in New York when people tell you to be quiet, it's too loud. Wally's is totally open, it's free. It's just a great place to play. When I played there, I was playing drums on Friday and Saturday. Every now and then I would play vibes. But like all things in music, after time passes by, things come to an end. And I moved from Boston and went back home to Baltimore. And I handed over the drum chair to the drummer today, Lee Fish.
Okay.
So
All right.
it's,
If you're not familiar with the club and you're in Boston, it's on Mass Ave. It's about a block from Symphony Hall, heading toward the ocean.
look for New York pizza.
And as long as you're prepared to stand,
Yeah.
you know, because the chances of getting a seat are slim.
Yes, you have to get there like 9 o'clock if you want to see.
But it's something that I think all jazz fans should experience because it puts you in touch with an environment that is harder and harder to find these days. I mean, were there places in Baltimore when you were coming up where you could go and play and sit in?
There was a place in Baltimore called the Sportsman's Lounge. That place was owned by Lenny Moore. Lenny Moore is a former Baltimore Colt. Yeah,
right.
he owned that place, and they had it was kind of like an organ trio thing in there. They had an organ in there, and I was too young, but my dad, of course, would be like, "Come on, you got to get out and play." So he would bring me there on the weekends sometimes. But they had a jam session on Monday night, and sometimes when I knew my parents were sleeping, I would sneak out very quietly, and I would just go over to the club. And luckily, the owners knew me, so they were like, "You just go over here and you sit down. If you see a cop come, you go in the back." Is that club coming up? That was just about it because I was only 13, 14. It's not like I could catch the bus. Like I said, that club was within a mile, so I could do that one.
Did your parents ever catch you?
No, never. They had to they had to be up in the morning by like 5:30, so I knew when to catch them. They went to bed at 9:30 at night. I was out the door at 10. They don't know that, but I'll tell them one day.
You talked about playing drums at Wally's. I know you also play piano still professionally, right?
Yes. The best gig that I had on piano was with a vocalist. I toured with her for 5 years. Her name is Rachel Price. If you don't know who Rachel is, she's touring with a group called Lake Street Dive, and they're blowing up everywhere. So it's kind of like a country jazz group for the most part. But I toured with her for 5 years playing piano. We started here in not here. I'm sorry. We started in Boston, and we toured everywhere. But we didn't really play too many major cities. It was funny. We used to always go to say, I would see on the schedule like we're going to Illinois. So my first thing is we're going to Chicago. Yes, we would fly into Chicago, but then we would drive somewhere like 5 hours and play at some middle school somewhere. But but it was great. We had a great time playing with Rachel. I also played a little bit of piano, mainly vibes, but mainly with Bobby Watson.
Okay.
I joined Bobby's band.
Was that Horizon? Was it?
No, he had a group called the Live and Learn group. It was full of young musicians. I think that was in 2007. And I toured with Bobby for 2 years, and mainly vibes, but there was a few songs he wanted me to play piano on. And, besides a bunch of local gigs in the Baltimore, Washington area, sometimes I try to play piano on my own gigs. It all depends on what the situation is.
But vibes seem to be your focus now. Is that accurate?
I like to say vibes and drums. I think the general public has made vibes my focus, and that's not a bad thing. I don't hate people for that. But the thing is, I'm very much a drummer, and when I play vibes, I'm very much thinking in a percussive way, in a very rhythmic way. A lot of songs that I compose are through the drums first. I never write from the vibes. I just can't do it. It's either going to be from the drums or the piano. But I mean, it's not bad. It's not a bad thing that vibes is number one because I figured I have a kind of a leap over the entire jazz scene because I've never lived in New York, and it can be a rough business. It's very rewarding I believe if you really play from your heart. But no, vibes is a great thing. It's not an everyday instrument. People love it. You don't get to see it performed as much as it looks cool. To see people taking mallets and beating the crap out of it. And I've heard people. I have like multiple colors, not today, of mallets. And people have said to me, they're like, "Wow, you move so fast. You need to turn off the lights so people can have a light show or something like this." But no, the vibes is great. I love it. But I'm very much a drummer as well.
Okay. So how did you determine what kind of ensemble would be the right setting for the vibes?
Well, I really didn't. I mean, out front, I mean, I'm always going to have a piano, bass, and drums for the most part. I guess getting a horn player can be, I won't say tricky, but I just have to watch what else is going on around me. With Christian McBride's band, Inside Straight, it's the piano, bass, and drums, and then we have alto sax. So I try not to get alto sax in my band at times because it's going to pretty much sound like Inside Straight because we're both bands are swinging, and it can be kind of a mix or confusion. So I may try to do something different, like add a vocalist at times, or maybe a saxophone and a vocalist. Other times, I remember I did a show in Mexico last year. I was telling Lee about this coming up today. The stage was so big, it was like this. And we had everything on stage. We had a space for extra drum sets. And Greg Hutchison was on the gig, so I had two drums on stage, two drum sets on stage. I also played piano. Then I jumped over to the vibes. So I just try to make it different. Just I don't want to be like the modern jazz quartet and Gary Burton with his band with the guitar. I just want something different. You know, if it's not going to look different, it has to sound different. So instead of swinging all the time, I try to do some type of grooves and things like that with the vibes, just to make people feel good.
And one thing I noticed on the new CD is the variety in the compositions, most of which you wrote, I think, with one or two exceptions.
For the most part.
And you seem like you're consciously trying not to be locked into one particular groove.
I'm always striving to just have simple melodies. I'm always trying to just come up with that type of rhythmic feel from the drums. Like the drums is a very serious part in my band. I need the drums to be like kind of like out there in your face. It does not send in terms of volume, but it just has to be very present. I try to do everything from it to make sure it's a nice swinging 3/4 to a swing field, maybe to a backbeat, to a waltz. I mean, it can be many different things. I just try to make things, just as long as you feel it, and I see the people doing this with their feet, or if they just snapping, or if I just see them moving their head. That's more important. I'd rather not see people like
Taking notes.
yeah, taking notes, or just sitting like this. Like I know that there's no music playing, but I've been to many shows when people are just sitting back and they're just like, that was nice. I want people to say that was nice, and they're going to remember the song for a while. So it's very important to just for me to have some, simplicity going on.
Okay. Let me see if we've got some questions from the audience. I get to say for the there we go.
Well, I'm looking forward to the show tonight, and I heard the previous performance when Inside Straight was here. Loved the work. I happened to just see Jason Marcellus. I was down in New Orleans, and he's a percussionist originally too, who grew up as being a tiny child. So I was wondering if I wasn't even aware that there was that similarity. But what's your just comment on that? Do you think that would be a common transition from drums to vibes?
I think so. Most vibraphonists I know play really good drums. I mean, to be honest, a lot of people don't even realize this, but Lionel Hampton was one great drummer. I mean, yes, he had it in the shows where he probably had like a prop for a floor tom where he would get on the drum and stand around and jump on it. I think that had to be a prop because he would bust through the head. Yeah. But he was a really good drummer. There's a clip on YouTube. I forget who the other two. I think it was Papa Joe Jones and maybe Buddy Rich. But all three of those guys are going back and forth. And Lionel, in my opinion, he's on top of both of them. So it's very common. I'm trying to think of anybody else who plays drums and vibes. I'm sure there's some other ones. I think it's common. And I think it's important just to go ahead and try to do that. We're percussionists. When we're taught how to play, it's not just vibes. You learn how to play everything that has to do with percussion instruments. So it's just how serious do you want to be? Do you want to get better on the drums? So.
Just to add a comment to what you said, we must have been in New Orleans at the same
Maybe
time.
Could be.
because Jason did a duo with another vibraphonist in the tent. And I want to think his first name was Warren, maybe? Does that sound?
Oh, that's me.
Was it you? Was it you this year in New Orleans?
Where was that? The Little Gem Salon?
No, it was at the Jazz Festival in one of the tents.
Oh, it definitely wasn't me.
No.
It was an imposter impersonator.
So that was interesting, the duo concept, you know,
Okay.
and their styles.
Oh, he's.
Jason and, I don't remember the man's first name.
Yeah, that wasn't me, but I mean, it's interesting to do that. I actually did. We played the Umbria Jazz Festival this past December, and I did duo vibes with the great vibraphonist Joe Locke, and that was a lot of fun. I played duo vibes with a lot of people. I played with Stephon Harris. I did Jay Hogard. 2 years ago, we did. I forget how old he is. I'm sorry, but we did Bobby Hutchinson's birthday celebration in Yoshi's in San Francisco.
Bobby's actually, I want to say,
70.
70.
I'll say 72.
Yeah.
So, and he sounded great. You know, he's on stage with the oxygen tank and everything. He's getting old. He has health problems. So I asked him. I said, Bobby, how long can you play? He looked at me. He said, Warren, I do a melody and maybe one chorus of solos. That's it. He lied to me because when we got on the stage, he played a melody and about 3 choruses. I said, "You got it, maestro."
Yeah.
I was reading, Professor, earlier this week that you're going to be performing with your father on Father's Day in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, so when you two perform together, who plays what?
Majority of the time, he'll stick with the percussion, but he likes to get out there and he'll play a blues and he might play a tune like Ciara or something like that. The one thing that I love that I picked up from my father, because my father, he can play blues all day. And not saying he's going to play like every single chord change. He'll just play that one main blues scale that'll fit over the entire song. But he always gets to this one note and he'll hold it. And people love that. It's like no matter how much stuff we as musicians, we can learn how to play over this chord change. We can play this 2-5-1, and we can play all these alternate chords and this diminished and blah, blah, blah. As long as you hold that one note for sometimes from an audience perspective, they're like, wow, he's killing. So that's something that I picked up from my dad. I will hold that note out sometimes, and sometimes when you play and you hold that note, you might want to, it's all about stage presence. You got to learn musicians have to learn how to do this because a lot of musicians on stage, they look boring sometimes. But when you hold that one note out, it's a vibraphone, and you kind of lean back and you just like, you know, people like that. So that's one of the main things I picked up from my dad. But that's going to be a fun show. It's a lot of families in Baltimore. We're going to come together and we're just going to just have fun. So,
Any other questions from the house? I want to ask you one final thing. I see that you're part of the SF Jazz Collective.
mm-hmm.
Have you had a season with them, or are you about to start? Or?
We finished our first full season starting last October last year. So the SF Jazz Collective, we go out twice per year. In October, we go out. We start 2 weeks in San Francisco of rehearsing, and the last 2 weeks we go on tour, and then we finish our spring tour on the East Coast. So this past season, we did music of the past 10 years of the collective. So we did music ranging from the music of Herbie Hancock to McCoy Tyner, Stevie Wonder, and Horace Silver, and somebody else, I forget who it was. But this season coming up, starting in October, we'll be doing the music of Joe Henderson. Mm-hmm. So this will be a true season for me because when we started in October last year, most of the guys have already played all of that music. So basically, the rehearsals were kind of like for me playing catch up. So when October comes around, it's all going to be fresh music for everybody. So the rehearsals are going to be nice and intense. You know, I was telling Lee again, we had a nice conversation coming up. We drove 4 hours from Boston. The rehearsals are 2 weeks, 5 days a week from 10 o'clock to 5. So it's like a job. So, but we're going to have fun.
And, I mean, you don't just do repertory, but don't you also have to bring in original
That's
music?
right.
For
I'm
the
sorry.
group?
That's right. Yeah. So we're taking music from Joe Henderson or any composer that we have that we're doing which season, and we arrange it, and then we'll also bring in a piece that season, that we arrange for the band. The band is 8 members. We're from all around the world. There's you all know the members in the band?
Well, they change over time, right?
They change,
Yeah.
but the current lineup is from Puerto Rico. We have 2 Puerto Rican saxophonists. It's Miguel Zenon and David Sanchez. From Tel Aviv, Israel, we have Avishai Cohen on trumpet. Philadelphia, Robin Eubanks. Myself from Baltimore on vibes. Where is he from? He's from somewhere in South America, but he lives in Miami. Ed Simon on piano.
Venezuela.
Venezuela, Punta Cana, something like that. Auckland, not Oakland, Auckland, New Zealand. Matt Penman on the bass, and from Miami, Florida, Obed Calvaire. So it's a lot of people. We get to write for. It's a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. I've already completed 1 song, so it took a long time to do that 1 song because I have a lot of other things to be doing outside of that. So
Okay. Well, I'm sure we all really look forward to hearing your band tonight. And just tell us who else is in the band.
we have again Jake Sherman. He's from the Boston area. He's on organ, and Lee Fish. He's on drums. And he's also from the Boston area, and we're going to be playing a lot of blues and just some feel good music. It's going to be swinging. I'm really looking forward to it because this is the first time I really play with Jake in my own setting. So. And I played with Lee a bunch of times, so I'm looking forward to Lee too. But
Okay, so I'm sure we'll see everybody back here at 8 o'clock. And I hope I see you all at 5:30 on Saturday in the Tarrant Gallery when we do our listening session on Benny Golson's New York scene. Thank you all for coming. I really think we've had 6 fascinating conversations this year. And what a diverse group of artists, all great artists, but everybody from Benny Golson, who's 85, to Julian Lage, who's 25 or 26 or something, and Warren, who's not much past 25. So
I'm a little older than that.
but
35.
no, you gave your age away, right? But every year I enjoy this, and it's because of musicians like Warren, who aren't just great musicians, but very articulate about what they're doing and what inspires them, and I think it inspires all of us. So thank you, Warren, and thank you.
Thank you.